All three judges scored a fight 118-110. I had it a round closer, I had it 117-111. George Groves wins the fight by wide decision. And I got to say, I get enough of them wrong, so I've got to take credit when I get one right. I'm pretty happy with my Keys to Victory video here and my prediction, because, you know, Martin Murray's a respectable fighter. He's a guy who always performs with credit. But as I said, fundamentally, I didn't believe he had the skill to box with George Groves. And I just didn't think he had the offensive capability, the jab, or the power to win 7 of the 12 rounds. I thought that was going to be his downfall here. And I was a bit perplexed about how Martin Murray started this fight. It was obvious his tactic was to try and pressure George Groves and to try and make George Groves gas later on in the fight. But the truth was, he just threw away the first 3 rounds. The first 3 rounds were just easy work for George Groves. Groves got into his comfort zone, established a jab straight away, and just won the first 3 rounds out of activity. And for me, George Groves is a fighter who you need to really pressure. And I, in my Keys to Victory video, said Groves wouldn't like it if Murray got on his chest and if Murray starved him of air and, you know, took the space away from him. And the second Murray started doing that in the 4th round, Groves looked far less comfortable. But the truth is, when Murray allowed Groves the reins and the ability to use his jab in the first 3 rounds, Groves was really able to dictate the pace and really get into a sort of comfort zone, if you like, which meant that he was not only picking up the rounds, but also his stamina wasn't being tested. And in that sense, I've got to say it was a bit of a disappointing performance from Martin Murray, and actually one of the worst performances I've seen from Martin Murray in his career. He pretty much threw up the first 3 rounds to George Groves, and really allowed George Groves to be the ring general in there and to dictate this fight. For me, the tactic for Martin Murray was fairly obvious in the sense that he had to try and close down the space a lot earlier in the fight. And I just don't think he did that. Sure, George Groves did start to sag in terms of stamina towards the later of the fight. But the problem was that Martin Murray had stood off him for so long that by the time that occurred, Martin Murray had had a lot of the fight beaten out of him from that Groves jab and from that, you know, Groves long range game. I think it was the 8th round that George Groves was literally landing bomb after bomb after bomb from range on Martin Murray. And that's so sapping for Murray. You know, if Murray had been a lot closer to him, George Groves wouldn't be able to get all of those shots off. You know, Groves for me is a guy who's got a lot more power in his work when it's long range. He isn't a guy with as strong a punches when they're thrown short for me than when he's throwing them long. So I didn't really understand the Murray tactics. I thought Groves was allowed to do what he wanted to do for far too long of the fight. But you got to give George Groves credit. You know, George Groves had enough power, had enough snap to his work to keep Murray off him. And, you know, obviously Murray tasted the power and maybe didn't want to rush in. George Groves' jab, George Groves' power kept him honest. I've also got to give some credit to Shane McGuigan, because since Groves started with McGuigan, I've got to say I've seen improvements from George's game. Groves seems to be very patient, he's thinking a lot in there, and he's really utilising that jab. Groves has always had a very, very good jab and a good long range game. But I think what's important is that McGuigan has really got him using it and everything's being thrown off it, which for George Groves' style of fighting, for me, works very, very well. And he looked decent in there. He made Martin Murray look a lot more basic than Murray looked against Arthur Abraham or Felix Sturm or Sergio Martinez, for example. So yeah, I've got to give a lot of credit to George Groves. And George Groves, he's a big name. He's a fighter who generates a lot of interest. I don't know who he's going to fight next. There was some talk that he might fight Chudinov, now that Felix Sturm has been stripped of the title for failing a drugs test. And on the basis of this performance, you'd have to say Groves would be a favourite in that fight. Martin Murray, you know, I'm recording this video straight after the fight, so I don't know if Martin Murray's done any interviews or any comments. You just wonder if Martin Murray is on the slippery slope now. Has he had too many tough wars in there? And you kind of get the impression at this stage of his career that maybe the opportunity has passed. And I wouldn't have anything negative to say if Martin Murray decided to call it a day after that fight. You know, we'll have to see. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Where should both guys go from here? How did you score it? Were you impressed with George Groves' performance? Many thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this, hit the thumbs up button. Do leave your comments below. And if you're new, please subscribe.